we have phenomenal speakers. I would like to introduce them. Dr. Ofek Hai, who's a cardiologist and an associate program director for cardiology. He's also a counselor for Brooklyn for NYACP. We have Dr. Ivan Siau, who is a hospitalist at Mount Sinai, Beth Israel. And also he has been engaged with NYACP and doing as a judge for abstracts and posters. And we have Dr. Raphael Rabinowitz, who is a nocturnist transitioning into a hospitalist. And his interest is sim lab medical education and wants to increase focus utilization in the internal medicine field. So I welcome all three of them, and I hand it over to Dr. Sau to start his presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Gambhir, and congratulations again to Early Career Physicians Committee. What a wonderful news. Hi, everyone. Hello. Thanks for joining us at 6 p.m. I imagine you're all maybe just getting off your clinics or your shifts, and we're happy to have you here, and we're happy to actually go over this. I think, and I hope that this is going to be very useful for you. But really today, Dr. Hai, Dr. Rabinowitz, and I are going to talk about abstract poster and presentation for your next academic conference. And for New York ACP, we have one coming up at the end of the month. So, so we're excited for that conference for sure. But let's start the presentation with our objectives, what we want to get out of the meeting today. Obviously, really having a poster and an abstract presentation is a wonderful way for you to show the scholarly work that you've done. It's an opportunity for you to really share it with others and meet other people. So it's very important to prepare an effective poster and also do an oral presentation that's effective. So really what we want to highlight here are some of the high quality features and also some of the common pitfalls that we think, we should avoid when we prepare an abstract poster or oral presentation. So next slide, we have no financial disclosure, the three of us, and let's start. So, this is going to be kind of what we're going to go through for now. This is how a poster maybe would look like. And we're going to go over 5 different sections. And the first one is really, what does that mean? High quality poster, right? So we'll show you with an example. Next slide. So a high quality poster is something that obviously the first thing that comes on the top of the poster is a title. It's something that should be readable from afar, above 10 feet away. Different conferences may have different poster size. Some conferences are turning into switching to a digital presentation. So you also want to be aware about the size of your poster. But generally, something that you can read from 10 feet away. You want to really use that diagram, that charts, that photo or images, anything that you have relevant to your either clinical vignette, your scientific research poster, or your quality improvement posters. And as you can see, it's really going to attract people because there's going to be a lot of posters, but you really want to have something that will attract attention and pull people in so they can read. They want to read more about your abstract, about your poster. You want to have the sections in organized manner, right? So it's easy to follow from left to right. And you also want to have that good flow from your very beginning, your introduction, to the very end, which is your conclusion. You want to make sure that between these different sections that you have in a good amount of blank space for distinction. And obviously you want to include your affiliation, your institutional affiliations, and very important to also have your acknowledgement and references on your poster as well. So we're going to go over this one fantastic poster, which was also a winner of an ACP poster competition. So we can zoom in with the next slide. And you can kind of see, right, this is a very engaging poster. If you're walking in a conference, you can kind of see, wow, there's this very eye-catching graphs and figures, You want to go look at it and you want to read about it. The title is there. It's easy to read. And I'm going to go over this again later with this, we're going to go over this. This poster is fantastic. So there's a lot of good points about it. So I'm not going to go into all the details right now, but really you can see the good flow, really good sections from the beginning, from the background, all the way to the limitations and the citations at the end, right? So we can go over the next slide as well. Yes. And really, we're going to go over the next slide as well, which is now we're going to go over the text. So now that we've kind of seen the general features of a high quality posters, now we're going to go into some of the details. So, but text, you want to, with the title that you have, would be great if it's also an interesting title, because usually that's, after the graph, someone's probably going to read your title next instead of jumping straight into your introduction or your background. So anything that is interesting is also going to hook your audience to really stay and read the rest of your poster, right? You want to also focus on major findings. You may have a lot of results, a lot of amazing data, a lot of fantastic graphs and numbers, but you want to really focus on the major findings. Usually you really want to also use bullet points, and it's easier rather than really text in paragraphs. And you want to make sure that you keep everything succinct. Everything can be finished within 10 minutes. And again, I'm repeating myself, but really a font size is very important for you, especially before you print out your poster, and knowing about the size that you're going to be able to tell that, all right, this font size is not going to be too small and it could be readable from several feet away. So like next slide, some of the examples that we can see in here, as I've mentioned, that's the title, right? One of the title at the top is it's placing cop under arrest. So this is a clinical vignette on a case with the organizing pneumonia. And then you can see at the left is from the previous poster that I showed you, and they really use that bullet points and really good visuals so people could really follow along and not really they get hooked. They want to read about what's going on. And then really this poster too really focuses on major findings and really able to convey that major findings through their use of graph. Next slide. So really this is what you're going to be thinking about when you're also creating your poster, especially the text section. So the next section is going to be graphs and figures, and I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Rabinowitz.
Thank you so much, Dr. Siau. Before I begin, I did want to take a moment just to thank the authors that contributed these exemplar posters and slides. We actually had contributions from 7 different winners, both at the state and national level in the ACP competition from last year. And that's what makes up the bulk of our presentation in terms of the exemplar slides that we're showing you. As far as graphs and figures are concerned, we have a figure here from our very own Dr. Gambhir. I wanted to highlight it as an exemplary work. Please note all the features of it that it contains with respect to labels, a title, and it's very easily legible using color coding to give good contrast between the control and intervention group. Really an exemplar image that supports the audience being able to digest the results of the study without having to dig through a bunch of text to get the full effect of the presentation. Moving on to background and design, we wanted to highlight an exemplar from a different winner. So note the use of color-coded figures here and the diagrams in place of text that are functioned to communicate the design of the study, again, using flow charts, visual aids instead of just text on a figure. The key point in all of this is that By giving contrast in the background and in the figures, it really makes the presentation pop out. The information is conveyed easier for the audience, even if you are looking at this image from afar. Now let's transition to Dr. Hai. He's going to discuss effective presentation skills, and then we'll go into a little bit further detail about exemplars from each of the submission categories that we will be judging at the upcoming ACP conference.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Rabinowitz. Up until now, you've heard some really great general tips on how to create excellent, high quality posters, which can really be applied to any of the categories that you submitted to. So that's the research category, the clinical vignettes, and the quality improvement posters. And what I'd like to do now is shift the focus a little bit on really what are the keys to preparing an effective poster presentation, the actual presentation part of it, and to provide you with some of the best practices to help you in your preparation for the upcoming meeting, the New York ACP meeting to come at the end of the month, and really for any meeting thereafter. And I also want to mention that a lot of this is going to be tailored more to the research category, but pretty much most of it can be applied also to the other two categories. And you're going to hear a lot more about the clinical vignettes and the quality improvement from Dr. Rabinowitz and Dr. Siau a little later on. Also, I encourage you to ask questions in the chat if there are any, so that we can always go over them at the end. So to start with, why do we do this poster presentation? So again, it's an excellent opportunity to visually display your work and to communicate your research, all the great work that you have done. And it's an amazing opportunity to network and discuss your work with others that potentially could include future collaborators or even funders. So you want to introduce yourself to as many of the attendees as possible, and poster readers, and as many people as possible. So you want to prominently wear your name tag and provide your contact information widely so that you can network. Next slide. Okay, so what are some of the best practices that you can do to prepare an effective presentation? And by the way, some of the stuff we're going to be going over here, it's not an exhaustive list, but it's some of what we felt were some of the best things you can do to enhance your posters and your presentation style. And a lot more information can be found on the ACP's website, and we'll provide you with those links at the end. One of the first thing I wanted to talk about was making your presentation as visual as possible. So you already saw that beautiful poster that Dr. Siau showed. It's so appealing that most likely somebody at the end of the room will be able to see it and want to come and engage with you on it. And that's really what you want. You want to make it as visual and as beautiful as possible, so that would make it very effective. The other thing is that you want to be able to speak to how all of the work that you did was carried out. So what that means is you want to be knowledgeable about your research area. So you're like kind of the content expert on this area and what you've done. So you want to know in general how everything was carried out, the methods, and the how you came to the conclusions as best you can, and in a simplified form, so that it's easy to understand for everybody. A really great poster, just like the one that we showed and we'll show again, is a poster that's very organized. The flow is logical, the wording is concise and not in a cluttered kind of way. And proper use of and good use of grammar, avoiding too much jargon or too many abbreviation. So a good poster really comes down to also having, it's really predicated on having a really good abstract to begin with. But how you actually use the space in a poster is actually really important, and that's what's going to make it very effective. When you present, you want to speak clearly. You want to smile and show enthusiasm. You want to use pauses in an effective way to to emphasize your important points. You may want to summarize briefly at some points, maybe during the transition points. In order for the audience to understand you better, to maybe if sometimes you'll notice that attendees will come in the middle of your talk. So sometimes if you summarize at the transitions, it can maybe make it easier for people to follow. And the other thing that, this is not a must, but the other thing that would be very helpful and make it really a slam dunk is to provide supplementary data, in the form of a QR code. So QR codes are pretty cool things to do nowadays, where you can really, allow for a lot more information to be available if it's needed, and in a way that doesn't clutter your poster. And it's helpful for any kind of supplementary data, or if you want to, link to other research, or to even your contact information or your CV or your website. So this way, it serves a lot of purposes, and you can be really creative with that. Let's go to the next slide. So I can say that the three of us, or even the four of us actually, including Dr. Gambhir, we have all served as judges in the past. And I'm excited to be able to serve again in the upcoming meeting at the end of the month. So what exactly are we looking for when we're judging your posters? Right, so let me share with you the criteria that we look for. And again, this is kind of specific to the research category, but some of it will also be applied to others as well. And so you'll see. So what are we looking for exactly? Originality. So how original is the concept that's being presented in your poster? Or how original is the new approach maybe to an older problem? The important thing here is that you're providing new knowledge. You're advancing the science. You're advancing the medical field. So we're looking for that. How significant are your findings in terms of increasing the understanding of the disease process, or in improving therapeutics or diagnostics? How significant is it? How about the presentation style? Just like we mentioned before in the previous slides about high quality posters, are we using the proper format? Most of you here should probably know, or probably do know, about the IMRAD format, right? The introduction, method, results, and discussion or conclusion, or there are some variations to this format, but but in general, you want to follow a logical format and flow, and the manner of the presentation should be interesting and engaging. In terms of the methods, how suitable was the research design for your stated objective? So we're looking to see that it does where the methods used make sense in order to answer the question. Again, the visual impact, can't stress it enough, how important the visuals are. And not only the actual beauty of it, or of the visualization, but also the appropriate use of figures and graphs. Are you do the figures and graphs convey the information efficiently and appropriately for the research that you're showing? and the interview, quote unquote interview. Basically, judging is kind of like an interview. So, we're looking to see your how much knowledge you have of your research, and the professional attire, and the again, with the manner of the presentation, how you engage and how conversational you may be. So these are just some of the things that basically we're looking for in how you present. So let's go on to the next slide. Okay, so again, we want to show this beautiful poster because it's really a truly aspirational poster. And so we've looked at how catchy the title is, for example. Like, well, let's look at it in more detail. The catchy title, the very good use of colors and contrast. It's not cluttered. It's very easy to read. Great use of the graphics. If you look here, it even says at the bottom, there's a QR code that says, scan here for more information on methods and results. So that's great because you can actually explain more if that's wanted, and to be able to give more material. Again, it's no wonder that this was one of the first place winners. Let me show you another one on the next slide. This is another great poster, another winner. Very similar kind of things. Again, a very logical flow. Great use of colors, and easy to understand. The important points, the really important points are in like either a different color or in a box that's with a different color. There's contact information, acknowledgement. So again, very good, very high quality poster, and another winner. And we could always go over this in more detail at the end if anyone has any questions as well. So let's go to the next slide. So I want to encourage you all to also, especially if you're a beginner in this, to make use of ACP's excellent online resources. This is one example of something that's available on the website. It's a checklist of really everything you need to put in for a high quality poster. We're also gonna make available our slides at the end as well. So that should hopefully help you. So I think let's, and basically at this point, I'm gonna hand it back over to Dr. Rabinowitz to give us some really great tips on the clinical vignettes category. And again, let us know if you have any questions. We'll try to get to you, to everyone who has questions. So thank you very much. Dr. Rabinowitz.
All right, thank you, Dr. Hai. So as I understand, the majority of submissions that we received for the upcoming NYACP competition came from the clinical vignette category. So I'm gonna take a little more time to speak in depth specifically about these types of presentations. I wanted to take one step back and just discuss why we do clinical vignettes in the first place. I sometimes worry that there might be some almost stigma associated with this type of research, that we've kind of been trained in medicine to think these are anecdotal studies, they're of lower quality evidence. And while they may not be as persuasive as, say, a well-run RCT, I do think they have a lot of value for a number of purposes, which I wrote here. I think the opportunity to showcase rare diseases that we won't normally encounter always in clinical practice, as well as for common conditions we have to highlight unusual presentations or complications of them, and even just to talk through appropriate, cost-effective, efficient diagnostic testing I think those are all reasons that we should aspire to do clinical vignettes. And as we know, every disease has to, as an entity, first starts as an observation. So I put here an example of the first case series that was published that eventually led to the characterization of what we now know as NSF, nephrogenic sclerosing fibrosis. And so this was an entity that had not been defined until a case report came out of it, or a case series in this case. Here is an image from it, and I just wanted to highlight the excellent use of clinical imaging by the original authors to allow for us as the audience to detect this entity that was otherwise unknown in our own clinical practice. So now let's talk a little bit about naming your presentation. So as I mentioned before, we have been graciously contributed exemplars from last year's winners. So here we have both the winner in the poster competition. So that was a rare case of chronic pneumonia by Dr. Katzman, and the winner in the PowerPoint competition, which was IVIG placing COP under arrest by Dr. Moss. What I wanted to highlight about both titles is that they are informative to the topic, but they don't give the case completely away. So that lets us as the audience kind of follow along, use our own clinical reasoning, and kind of figure out the diagnosis as we go along through the presentation. Let's now talk about the introduction section. So I like to think of an effective intro as we would a good illness script. And that means it's concise, it's relevant, it highlights the distinguishing features, and it keeps out a lot of redundancy. So for example, in the case of the angry lungs, which was a case of acute fibrous organizing pneumonia, they wrote, it presents as recurrent pneumonia in an immunocompromised patient. I think that is beautifully said. It's extremely helpful in orienting us as the audience to the memory of the case so that we can sort of adopt it in clinical practice. And I can say personally, as my own anecdote, I was actually taking care of a patient on a bone marrow transplant service overnight that had this exact presentation as I was putting together these slides. And I debated whether or not the sign out that said to restart their cefepime was actually indicated in this case. The other option is to leave out the intro altogether and just get right into the vignette. So that's what the cryptogenic organizing pneumonia case did. They just went straight into 72-year-old man presented with dyspnea and scant hemoptysis. This is probably easier done if you were doing a PowerPoint than if you're doing a poster presentation. Now let's talk a little bit about how you can most effectively describe the clinical presentation of your vignette. So here are some things to consider. You can try to maximize the use of graphics instead of words to depict information. So here, instead of writing their pulmonary examination was significant for bibasilar rales and tachypnea, the author instead decided to visually depict these examination findings. Another way you can do this is use of lab skeletons and bolding of significant values, which can also save on text. And I think one of the biggest challenges I've always come across with clinical vignettes is how to orient an audience for the time course of events. And I think this author very effectively used a calendar icon in some of the main slides that they presented in their slideshow to denote which hospital day various events of the vignette took place. Here's the same presentation showing how the administration of IVIG allowed their patient to be rapidly weaned off high flow onto room air using that same calendar framework, very beautifully done on one slide. And then continuing on with the description, I think the other thing that is always engaging and super helpful for us to review are imaging and pathologies of the case. So, I speak from the perspective of an internist. I think it's always helpful to review these things because we don't always encounter them all the time. So here I have the CT from the case of the AFOP. But case in point, this is not the path from that case. It is actually the case. This is what nephrogenic sclerosing fibrosis looks under the microscope. So this is the actual path for the AFOP. So just a nice refresher for us that more focus on clinical bedside medicine. And then finally, talking about the discussion, there's different ways to approach it. One way that is important, I think, is to review why certain decisions were made in this clinical vignette. So if here, for example, in the cryptogenic organizing pneumonia case, they were justifying their decision to give their patient IVIG instead of steroids. And they sort of talked through their reasoning because the steroids were having intolerable side effects for their elderly patient in the form of auditory visual hallucinations, agitation, getting out of bed. Plus, they depicted all these things graphically with these nice images. In addition, the discussion is also an opportunity to extract a lesson the readers can take home from the case. So here's an example from the AFOP case, talking about how these kind of AFOP, which is another form of organizing pneumonia, kind of can follow an infectious process in patients that are immunocompromised and can't and sort of experience prolonged inflammation because they can't clear the infection. And so with all that, we'll transition back to Dr. Siau to talk about quality improvement.
Thank you. That was such a great overview for the clinical vignettes. There's so many good points there. So I echo, everything that Dr. Hai, Dr. Rabinowitz have mentioned, and I'm going to just briefly go over quality improvement. Some of you maybe will submit and will have your posters in quality improvement, but really, it's the same concept, same ideas for the high quality posters, but the difference between the quality improvement and the scientific research or the clinical vignettes, you may ask, is like, how do we present this quality improvement resource that we've done at our institution? So the way I think about quality improvement is really kind of like baking, right? This is, I have an example here. I don't know if you're familiar with this show, Nailed It, but you could kind of see there's someone who tried to bake this at home, and then if you click next slide, Raphael, and then you're really trying to do this one thing here that you saw on the internet, on the social media. So the quality improvement in my head is kind of like the stairs that goes from, how you want to achieve things, the quality piece, and where you are right now. Maybe you're not really there. And this is what you did, a stepwise approach. And this is how you achieve that quality in your institution. And you want to share that. You want to share that with others. So next slide. So really, there are 4 questions that you want to ask. And this is also the questions that you ask when you're doing the quality improvement project in the first place. So a lot of you may be familiar with the SMART aim. So it's really, why did you start? So I think it's important to share that, having that in the background as, this is our current state of the institution, and this is the aim that we achieve. This is the SMART aim, which is your specific, measurable. It's something actionable, relevant, and timely. And then your second question is like, really, what did you do, right? How did you achieve that quality improvement? And there are many ways to achieve quality improvements. A lot of you probably are aware about PDSA cycles. There are many other methods, the lean management, Six Sigma, and other things. So please do share, like, what did you do? How did you do it? If you did a PDSA, you may want to kind of talk about that and maybe have some sort of visual representations of what you did. And then lastly, the third question is, what did you find, right? And then, so how do you really represent the results, right? You already talk about your background, you talk about your methods, how you did it. And then really now we're going into the results. So next slide, you'll see like a run charts. This is probably one of the most common way of how you convey what you did, with the the x-axis usually being time, either in days, weeks, or months. And then you also want to have that unit of measurement, your resource. What are you watching for, right? You're looking at the rate of, infections on the floor, or maybe you've seen this probably, hand washing compliance on medicine units or some other units in the hospital. I really want to kind of follow that. And it's really nice to have this process and run chart, and you can want to mark where you start maybe you're doing PDSA cycle 1 here, and then you're doing another cycle over here, or some other interventions. And there also, again, depending on your methods, you could see on the next slide that, you could do a process map, really, you identify that this is the process of how we get to certain things in your institution, and we actually address problem over here, or problems over here. As you can kind of see from an example here, they use that kind of frowny face, right? Where they identified some of the issues with people having issues here with appointments, or waiting time is really long, and you kind of want to kind of represent that this is what we were working on. And then you'll see on the next slide as well another example, which is really something that you've probably done as well. And if you've been involved in the root cause analysis, it's a fishbone diagram. If it's something that you want to share with your, again, this is your methodology that you picked, then you kind of want to use that. Whatever really the methodology that you use for the quality improvement, you want to have that represented and as either your methods part, and also on your results part. And then the last question on the next slide would be, what does it mean, right? So as I mentioned, to me, it's really about sharing, kind of like, trying to achieve that higher quality state at your institution that you want to share with others. And that may actually, can be implemented in other institutions. That would be great, because you can see on the next slide that it's kind of like baking. It's really about sharing your recipe, right? You want to share so everyone can actually get a better outcome, better baked goods. And I really think about that when I'm thinking about where do we start with the quality improvement poster. So with that said, I'm going to hand this back over to Dr. Rabinowitz, I think, who's going to go over some of the pitfalls. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So in keeping with the theme of our presentation, I tried to make the pitfalls slide an exemplar of what not to do without using anyone's specific work. So we've all kind of sat through painful presentations in the past where authors will basically show slides with long strings of text. They read every word. We should really avoid doing this. We don't want to be Ben Stein. We want to keep our audience engaged and into the presentation. And one of the most important things to do in order to maintain that engagement is to make it so people can read what you're writing. So make sure your text is uniform and that it's easy to read. I think the easiest way to do that is to use light text on a dark background, which I readily admit we have done a poor job of role modeling over the course of this presentation. But that really gives a good contrast so that people can see what was written a long way away. I wanted to keep this part kind of short so that we can have some time to open up the webinar for discussions and questions. So we have been monitoring the chat for the questions that have come in, but if you have further questions you'd like to ask for us, please do put them in the chat and we can go through them as they come in.
There's some great questions I didn't get to reply to by Karen. I don't know, Karen, if you want to unmute, otherwise we can kind of just go over. There are the first question is, can we change the title from the original submission? I think I think it's fine. It doesn't have to be exactly the same title, because now you're seeing some other peoples are using titles to kind of hook your audience, right? But I'll leave it also to Dr. Gambhir, Dr. Rabinowitz, Dr. Hai. Any comments about that?
That's certainly something I've done in the past. I think oftentimes you're faced with a deadline to submit an abstract with preliminary results. And as your results come in, maybe your conclusions change or you find something new interesting in your data. So I would say that whatever you're presenting, the title should fit with the information that you're going to show us as judges.
Yeah, I completely agree as well. I mean, you may have those changes from the preliminary to what you have after you had more time to do the work. And also, as long as you're not changing it to like a completely different topic, I mean, you should make your poster, like we said, visually appealing, and also the catchy title. Sometimes, so yeah, you should, I think you can easily, add supplementary material, as Dr. Gambhir said, and change the title to make it very interesting. So.
As long as the title is very similar to what you submitted on your abstract, we do send these out to judges for preliminary review. So if they're looking at your title and it doesn't match like your author's name, then there's going to be some confusion and they may strike you some points. So let's be conscientious of that. Keep on topic, like Dr. Hai said.
Yep. See, there's some more questions.
Yes, I think is there all the questions from Karen? I think she asked about, is it okay to add new supplemental information to sections, or should I add the supplemental information to a QR code? Actually, I just saw that Dr. Gambhir said add the supplemental information, which I agree with as well. You would want to add that supplemental information to your poster. If it's, as I said, you want to focus on major findings. So if the supplemental information is one of your major findings, then yes, please include that information.
Definitely, yeah.
All right, so there are questions.
Yeah, I also had a question regarding introduction section, if that's okay. About if there's any recommendation you have on like number of articles to cap it at, or whether to include additionally to include a reference section, despite it not being often required at conferences.
Anyone want to take that? That's a great question, but thank you, Joseph. So you're asked about the limits of numbers of references. Is that correct? As with other scholarly work, right? Every time you make a statement that you would require a citation or reference, then you would want to do that. And every time you use someone else's scholarly work, I think it's important for you to also do the citation. So even though it may not be explicitly stated out, I think it's just a good practice to have that reference. And it doesn't have to be, it may not follow the other text sections that we talk about, like you can read it from afar. It's not necessary. You don't want the font to be very tiny that people can't really read it, but it doesn't have to be something that you could read, it doesn't have to take up that much space if you're concerned about space on your poster.
Completely agree with that. Yeah, you can definitely make a smaller section at the very end, at the very bottom, smaller section that is readable but not prominent, and that is perfectly sufficient.
And I think you can also, oftentimes what I'll do is I'll have a whole references that I used for the presentation, but I just have the key one, a couple listed. So I'm not, I think one of the problems is you want to also have room to present all your good data and, your figures and things like that. So just having a bunch of text that's really hard for people to read isn't going to do any service for your thing, but you should acknowledge it. So you can have kind of a backup. Maybe one of the ways would be to include that in the QR code. That's one creative way to do it. But oftentimes I'll just have, these are selected references, the most important ones for this poster. And then I obviously, you do your due diligence and cite all the things in a separate document.
Just to add an excellent comment. So, you have limited space. So you have to be mindful the references you use are excellent, because otherwise you will have a big chunk of space using in your references. Just be mindful of that. So you'd be smart which references are important and go into your introduction. So that's just a add-on point.
Thank you, everyone. I think there's a question that was asked by Karun. Do we have samples for case report poster? And the second question is, my case had an update after submission. Can I update the abstract, including the title?
Yeah, I think we touched upon that. That's fine, as long as the This topic is similar, like I said, the judges get the abstracts in advance, and we want to make sure the title is very similar. And we do add the supplemental information, especially if you have advanced in your research or your program. So that's fine. I also want to mention something about references. I get a lot of calls in advance. Even for abstract submissions, do you include the references on your abstract submission in that 450 character text box? My answer is always no, not for the abstracts, but I do say on your poster, I recommend it. And like Dr. Hai said, keep it small, keep it at the bottom, but just have it on your poster. I get that question all the time. For as you know, and just for those of you who aren't presenting on May 27th, we have our next competition going to be in November 5th, and I'm going to be opening the online submissions probably the first week in June. So all this information is going to be good for that time too. So we are, just thinking of you with the timing of all this. So hopefully you got a lot out of it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I see some comments about recently coming back from the ACP meeting and wishing to have this information, and that was really our goal. That was our objective, and I'm really glad that it was helpful. And so
the format is we pair up judges. We have a really good contingency of judges this year. It'd be either 2 or 3. They're going to walk around and do 10 minutes for each poster for the final oral presentation on May 27th. I'm just answering this question. I believe it's from Karen. Is it from Catherine? And so just expect that you're going to have a dialogue for about 10 minutes with your team of judges, maybe give 7 to 8 for the presentation and 3 or 4 for Q&A at the end. And they're going to be judging you with the different criteria, presentation and originality, different things. So
there was a question, I think, meta-analysis and case report posters, I think came directly to me. Is there any posters for that? Examples we have? Karen, you must be able to help us out in that. Do you have any
examples of what, Dr. Gambhir?
About poster examples for case reports and meta-analysis. I think that question just directly came to me.
I would have to dig down and find one and share my screen. How about if I send a couple in a follow-up email tomorrow before I panic and go diving in? Because the last 2 years were virtual. And so we have slides and they're not quite posters. So if you don't mind, I would rather just take my time and find some, and I will send them along with the PDF of the slide set. Is that okay? It's going on my list of things to do.
Thanks for sharing. I see that Joseph also shared, you could also Google the ACP poster winners, and sometimes, some chapters, including, I believe our chapter also in New York has a list of the poster winners, and I don't have that link right now, and then we'll send it to you. Thank you, Karen, for looking into that. So also we'll send you some resources from New York ACP as well. But I see there's another question here from Ali that I think we didn't get to address yet. If your institution uses certain colors or provide templates, is it okay to use different colors for your poster? That's a great question. I think, I don't know about your institution, but where I'm from, my institution does not really dictate, the templates are there for you as a resource for you to use. So if the colors look good to you, and it will actually, again, as we have gone over the details on backgrounds, having a good contrast, and if it meets all those criteria, then go ahead. If you think it doesn't, then I think it shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, I would just check with a good example that I was going to bring up is if you are really into going to conferences and you're a busy resident and it's hard to, do involved, rigorous, clinical research or research in a laboratory, I've found in my residency that clinical vignettes were an amazing way to have my institution pay for me to go to conferences. So I probably went to a conference every year on NYU's dollar just by submitting a clinical vignette of some interesting patient I encountered in residency. And they would then fund me to go to, I think I went to CHEST, ACP, and SHM that way. And so I really encourage all of you guys to do that. Just on the EMR, save your interesting patients. And when the deadlines come up, they're always around the same time of year, write up a couple of them, even if you don't have something like that you've done, more involved. And so my only thing is, when they, agree to fund you going, they want their insignia displayed at the conference. So I just always checked with my institution, because I agree NYU's purple, it looks a little weird, but I think you just got to make sure you're conforming to the standards of the institution.
Thank you. And I kind of want, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying that's a great point there, Raphael. And, you're representing that institution, so you want to make sure, but very good points.
Right. And I agree with that, and I think that's a great point, that you really also want to use the resources that you have with your home institution, right? Usually you have your program directors, or if you're a student, your clerkship directors, where you really want to just kind of go over your posters. And obviously you probably have other authors, like more senior authors on your project, whatever it is, a clinical vignette, research, or QI. You would definitely want to go over the posters that before you go and print the poster, and that's going to be kind of permanent, because you don't want to reprint your poster, right? And then at the same time, you also kind of want to ask your programs and see if they have, funding, right, for printing or other resources that you would need for your poster. Okay. Any other questions that we haven't addressed?
Omar had a question about submitting a poster that was accepted at National ACP to the poster competition of NYACP. I actually don't know the answer to that.
I think Karen answered, yeah.
Yeah, I added it to the chat. Yes, as long as we, if you won, it's kind of not fair. So we just take, we'll accept your poster if it was accepted through National ACP, or if it was to a different CHEST physicians, different societies. If you submitted it to them, come submit them to us too. We're happy to take them.
I'll just piggyback on that comment. I have multiple times had success if you submit an abstract to one organization and they don't accept it for whatever reason, you can submit it to a different one, and it's usually the submission guidelines are pretty similar, and so it doesn't require moving mountains to edit it, and frequently it's just a matter of how many submissions come in. It doesn't speak to the quality of your work, and I've had a lot of success pivoting to different organizations, conferences.
We're really lucky too. Our judges, a lot of time with the online abstracts, submit comments. So if you weren't accepted, a lot of the residents and students asked me what the comments were, and I'm happy to provide them, and that'll make it, tweak your abstract a little bit and resubmit next time. And that I've seen a lot of them get resubmitted and accepted. I've been doing this a long time, so I recognize a lot of faces and titles, so it's all good. And I put up a link there. That's just a link that shows our resident website. On it are the winners from the fall competition. Didn't put their poster up because it was a slide. So we announced people's names. We put your online poster book is going to be included there too. So for the future, you guys all need documentation for your CV. You come to our website and you can pull up the online poster book, and there it is. You can bring that to whatever interview you go on or whatever letter you need. We have it all right there. If you can't find it there, call me. I have a pretty deep history of stuff here. I can help you out.
Okay. So if that's all for questions for now, we can just wrap it up.
Can I get the last question, please?
Yes, of course.
Sorry, this is Omar. Thank you very much. So can we get like a feedback notes after the upcoming poster competition, maybe like from Karen
Yep.
of the judges can make notes, so we can learn from these feedbacks for the future like competitions.
I collect all the grading sheets with the comments from the judges. So if they have them, I would certainly give them to you, but you have to ask me. I don't willingly print them out.
Sure.
But if you send me an email, you know, you guys usually see my email all over the place. I'm happy to provide you that information.
Thank you.
Any further questions?
I'm going to send everybody a copy of the slide set. I think I just saw that in the chat real quick. Yeah, to everybody that's on tonight. Karen just mentioned that. I'll send a follow-up email late this week with a PDF of the slide set, some references and some pictures of past conferences so you can see what to expect. And dates for maybe upcoming competitions, like probably the first week in June. So a lot of good stuff coming. So I'm glad you guys could join us tonight.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Karen. So we can just summarize to put it all together. What we think are the best characteristics of posters are ones that are organized, they flow logically, they're easy to read from far away, they're judicious with the amount of text they use, and they're attractive. They use graphics and you know, images from the actual case of the patient, or nice diagrams from the clinical research project. Doing those things makes your presentation easier to communicate to your audience and makes the lessons that we glean from it stick in our heads. So these are just exemplars that I think we've gone over nicely. Here's a link to the very useful ACP resources that are available on the web. And you can just go on to ACP's website and they have all these great resources that will echo what we've already said today. Please feel free to reach out to any of us with additional questions via email, which we listed here. Thank you all so much for joining our webinar.